two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. It's a Friday, so it must be Mark and James Day. We need to come up with some kind of here's Johnny type thing we say.
Well, we're working on that. Not to give any spoilers away, but there may be some changes in the not too distant future.
There may be some changes. The show that you know and love is going to get even better.
Topless presenting. Well, you anyway. I'm not. No one needs to see. Anyway, move on. Bad idea.
I've just become a little bit down and they've lowered the mood suddenly with that image. Let's not do that. However, us talk about writing and process and being a successful writer and becoming Mark Dawson. That's perhaps what we should rebrand. Why didn't we come up with that?
I quite like that. Yeah.
Becoming Mark Dawson.
I like it.
We're not going to call it that. We've called it something else to give that a little hint as well. Okay, this is the second of our episodes. As you may notice, we are on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. The park is behind us that way, and what you can see over there, what I love about this view, and I'll do a kind of sweeping shot with the camera afterwards to show you, is that all the water towers on top of the apartment buildings here. There's some amazing apartment buildings and some brownstones. I think we're in a brownstone here, but I love this view. It's very West Side Story, the fire escapes and the water towers. You're a West Side Story fan? Am I a fan? Not really. I'm not really my thing, but I can understand the West Side Story idea. Yeah, it's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, and we're certainly, well, this is the balcony, so John Dyer is actually down there, and later we'll be recreating that famous scene.
Why for art thou dour? Dyer. Dyer. Dyer is a good name for him, isn't it? When I come to think of say it out loud.
Yeah, very good name indeed, yes.
He's behind the camera, smirking at us. We have three great interviews. I hope you enjoyed last week. Karen Slaughter and JD Barker and Peter James we had on last week. And this week we have Lynda La Plante is going to be on this week's episode. And she is, it's an absolutely compelling interview. You're going to love it. So please do stay listening, for that one's going to come up at the end. But before then, we had a couple of interviews to go ahead of that. And one of them is, the first one is a guy called Mike Lewis. So Mike is a former military United States Air Force pilot. He actually flew AC-130 gunships, which are the Hercules gunship version in the Gulf War, got fired at a few times, is now a Delta Airlines pilot, flies the A330 on long haul, and is writing aviation historical thrillers. So he's my new best friend in life, and I got on like a house on fire with him and his wife, and it was absolutely lovely of them to come to our drinks and to chat to them afterwards, and I immediately knew that I wanted to talk to Mike on the podcast, not because of that, and we do a very little talking about aeroplanes, believe me, in this interview. Ignore him. What I wanted to talk to Mike about was the value of coming to a writers' conference. So Mark, you're at Romance Writers of America next week in Denver. We're going to go to Novelists Incorporated, because it's suddenly getting a bit windy. Novelists Incorporated in Florida. This is Thrillerfest here in New York. And I know a lot of people listening, they'll just be starting out writing, or they may have a few books, they may be in profit, they may be making good money, and all of them will be thinking, is it really worth going to these conferences? So I'm going to talk to you and ask you about that after this. But first of all, let's hear from Mike Lewis, because I wanted to hear why he's there and what he gets out of coming to these conferences. Okay, we're up on a mezzanine level in the giant Grand Hyatt Hotel. It's a big hotel, this, Mike, isn't it?
Yes,
We've just watched Mark on a couple of sessions, including a panel, and I wanted to have a chat with you because we were talking last night. And first of all, you are a former military pilot.
Yes.
You're currently a Delta Airlines pilot, and you're writing historical aviation thrillers.
Yes.
So basically, you're my older brother.
Yes, I am.
And I'm looking to you for advice and help. But the other reason I really want to talk to you is because I know people listening to this podcast will think, well, this sounds wonderful, being in New York at a writers' conference. There's a lot of money to get here. What am I going to get out of it? And is it worth coming to these events? So you've been to a few of them, and you were saying to me last night, you really do think it's worth it.
Absolutely. I can tell you, I started my first conference was a Florida Writers Conference that I went to in the state of Florida where I live, and just the information that you pick up on the craft of writing is extremely valuable. Plus, you're going to meet a lot of people that are in the same situation you are, and you can share ideas and experiences and help each other out in that way. But after a few years, my wife gave me permission to come to Thrillerfest, which as a thriller writer is the ultimate. You're dealing and talking with the top professionals in the field, the A-list authors, and you get an opportunity to actually walk up and say hello and meet these people and ask them questions. And if you want to be an author, you just can't beat going to a conference and interacting with these individuals, learning the craft, meeting the people, find out how they did it. Because the truth is, every single author out there exactly where we've been at one time, or you might be at one time. Everybody starts at ground zero.
Yeah, and that is absolutely true. So even though you've got big, famous household names, there was a time when they were like me, without a book published, and you in the early stages, your third book, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a good example of that is that John Dyer and I spotted Lee Child yesterday walking past us, and we very creepily dropped down a couple of escalators and followed him out, waited for him to finish his cigarette and pounced on him, and he was the nicest possible guy, and he was pleased to speak to a couple of other Englishmen the day after we got thrown out of the World Cup, so it was nice to have her.
Yeah, and that's the absolutely wonderful thing about Thrillerfest is all the thriller authors here are just extremely friendly. They're more than willing to talk to anybody, so just walk up and say hello. What you don't want to do is introduce yourself and then say, can you get me an agent?
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
No.
But it's kind of like the Hollywood experience that, I have friends in Hollywood. I'm sure you know some people out there as well. It really is about building relationships. And that's how you're going to, I think, advance your career. You don't want to, like I said, just creep on somebody and try to mooch, just strictly information and try to get, your book sold through them. I think if you build those friendships and you build those relationships, that's where eventually those things will take place on their own without you trying to force it.
So networking, which does fill some people with dread, the idea of having to push yourself forward and talk to stuff. But you're like the easiest guy in the world to talk to, and I guess that's the trick, is just be interested in other people.
Well, it is, and I tell you, it's funny that you say that. And I'll share an experience. When I wrote my first book, we submitted it for an award, and it won a finalist in the Next Generation Indie Book Awards. And we were invited to New York City, the Harvard Club, to go to the ceremony. And people that know me will know me that I am rather gregarious and I don't have a problem talking. And my family will tell you, and my wife's back there laughing right now, I was terrified.
Get a shot, John. If you're watching on YouTube, there is Kimberly.
Yeah, I was.
You were nervous.
Yes, I tell you, I was a combat pilot. I would have much rather been back in combat, because when you write a book, you're writing one, you're putting your soul out on that page, and you are really exposing yourself. So it's a totally different environment that you find yourself in, and you just have to kind of get comfortable with it and accept it. But networking, you're right, absolutely. You just can't beat it at a writer's conference.
And it is much easier than it sounds, because once you're here, you'll hear somebody speak on a panel, think that's really interesting, you'll walk up to them afterwards and they'll be delighted that you've come to talk to them. It's
absolutely.
Not, nobody's giving you a cold shoulder, even if they're a household name. So what would you hope to achieve from something like Thrillerfest, personally?
Well, again, it's building those relationships. The first Thrillerfest that I came to, I found authors that wrote books like I did, and in fact, one of them sat right next to me in a panel that we were watching, and I looked over and I said, "Hey, aren't you James Hannibal?" And he said, "Yeah." So we started talking. We were both Air Force pilots. We were both airline pilots. We both wrote the same kind of books. And we just started chatting back and forth, and we exchanged email addresses, and he actually had a great idea that he shared with me about the chair that he writes in. He has a gravity chair, and it's just a little system he had set up because he had back problems.
What's a gravity chair?
It's just a chair that helps support your back.
Okay.
This is a side note, but I use that now. And that helps me when I write.
So small things that can make a big difference.
Little things like that. But that's how you build those relationships. You know, we weren't talking about those kind of book things per se. We were just talking and building a friendship. And when I published my second book, he gave me the blurb for the front cover.
What about more tangible things? Like, I think you went to pitch yesterday?
Pitch Fest is a great experience, and it's very unique for Thrillerfest in the fact that, from what I'm told in the industry, they have a greater success ratio than any other pitch program out there in the country at a writers' conference. But you have about a 2.5 hour opportunity to pitch to as many agents as you can get to. And pitching also is one of those things that seems quite terrifying at first. So you really just have to force yourself to relax, and it makes it that much easier.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your book. So we've hinted at the fact that you have an aviation background. So you were an Air Force pilot, and we chatted last night. I think you've flown in combat and been shot at a few times.
A few.
But you're here with us, which is great. And then now you fly with Delta. Are we allowed to say that sometimes you do some writing at work?
Well, no, I can't say that. I don't do any writing at work. I'm flying the airplane.
There you go, absolutely, as you should be, and all Delta passengers will be relieved to hear that. But you do end up down the line somewhere in places like, I think you're going to Sao Paulo in your next job, and you're now the third airline pilot I think we've had on the podcast, and they all say they get that time in the hotel. There's no distractions from the family, and that does lend itself to a writing experience.
It does, it's great.
Yeah, so I need to become an airline pilot, John, if I'm going to finish my book. And you've got your third book.
My third book was released about 2 months ago, Retribution, and it's actually a prequel for the series, the Jason Conrad thriller series. So we have Retribution, Surly Bonds, and then Veil of Deception.
Surly Bonds is such a great title for an aviation book.
Yes, I love it.
That's a good one. Well, look, Mike, I wanted to talk to you specifically to hear your take on why you're here, and for podcast listeners to think about potentially the value of being in a place like this, despite the expense and what you can get out of it. And I think you've illustrated that really well. So,
well, thank you.
And it's been a real great pleasure chatting to you. I hope we can stay friends, because I need that inspiration.
Absolutely, we will stay in contact, and I tell you, it's been great. I want to encourage everybody out there in SPF land, if you have the opportunity to meet you and Mark and John, you guys are just absolutely fantastic, and a heck of a lot of fun.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Mike Lewis, what a really lovely guy, and he took off literally down to his home in Florida yesterday, and he's now flying, I think, to Sao Paulo for his job. And we worked out that airline flying was a good job for me to have, actually, because then you get a lot of layovers for an hour where you can write your book.
Yeah, so he said he was going to Brazil 3 times this week and would have a day and a night there each time, I think it was, and a lot of time. Even when the plane is in the air, he can concentrate on other things as well. All these planes are so technologically advanced these days.
He doesn't. He flies the airplane at all times.
He does, absolutely. So yeah, he was great. We loved talking to him, and one of the things that he said, picking up what you said earlier, was the reason he comes to conferences like this is he likes to network and likes to meet people. And I don't know if it's an American thing, but Americans are very friendly generally. Most of the Americans that we've met here, and students obviously that have taken the course, are open, accommodating, friendly. Mike is very much like that, and was lovely. Introduced us to a few people that we hadn't met. Just very easy to talk to, very interesting, and clearly approaching this new career in a very professional, very focused fashion. Military background coming through there, I think, but really good guy. We liked him a lot.
And I think that's a really good point to make, Mark, because some people don't like the idea of networking. In fact, some people, I think, like the idea of a writing career because they don't have to meet people very often. But it's surprisingly easy, particularly in this environment in the United States. I do think people in the US want to talk to you all the time. If we're British, it's not quite the same, although I think in a writing environment it probably not too dissimilar in the UK. But certainly these conferences, you will find it very easy to walk up to people, start talking to them, and as Mike says, you start picking up friends who are going to be there and helping you, and you helping them for the rest of your careers. And actually, it's not just the other writers at your level. You can walk up to Lee Child, and you can walk up to
Peter James, Lynda La Plante, Karen Slaughter, any of the
George R. Martin.
Well, not quite.
He was slightly more difficult to get.
We did try, but with him, I think if you get too close, you're tackled to the ground by burly security guards. No, he was. That's not true. He was just very, very, very busy. We did try to get him on. John had a good attempt, and I think was intercepted by his publicist. And we have.
Was he rugby tackled by his publicist?
No, she was just very polite and gave him her email address. So we will reach out and we'll see whether we can get him on.
He is a bit fed up with people asking when his next book's coming out.
Well, yes, we absolutely did not do that. But yeah, that wouldn't be a question that we'd put to him. But it would be great to get him on as well. But yeah, generally speaking, it was very easy to meet these mega authors who sold millions and millions and millions of copies of their books, and from our perspective, get them on the podcast. But I saw them talking to fans and to fellow writers all the way through the 3 or 4 days of the conference.
Yeah, and talking of the conference, we've got a brief chat now with a guy called Jon Land, who's a writer. He's actually picked up the mantle of writing Murder, She Wrote. He is the new author of the Jessica Fletcher stories. And he's got a very, very interesting little giveaway, something exciting which might be happening in TV land to do with Murder, She Wrote in the middle of this interview, so listen out for that. But Jon is also one of the very early organisers of Thrillerfest, and he chaired the panel that Mark was on. He's one of... There's the wind again. He's one of life's great enthusiasts for writing, and it's a great chat. So here's Jon Land. Welcome to the SPF podcast.
Thank you very much.
Why don't you start off by giving us the SP on your writing, and then we're going to talk a bit more about indie and versus trad.
Well, I'm a thriller writer. My primary series is about a female Texas Ranger, a kind of woman, a female gunfighter, and one of a kind, a woman Jack Reacher. Okay. But I also write the Murder, She Wrote series. So I'm now. You're
Jessica.
I'm Jessica.
Okay.
Now my hair's a little different. Yeah. I haven't had it done yet today.
Well, it's not that different.
My brooch. I don't have my brooch.
Yeah.
And I'm a little dark today.
So how do you end up writing Jessica Fletcher stories?
It's one of those one man's fortune's residue of design. My agent represented the author who wrote all 46 books in the series, but he got older and he got sick and then he died.
Right.
So I replaced Donald Bain, and I say fortune residue of design. It sounds like a mean thing to say because the guy died, got sick first. But the fact is that because we had the same agent, it was a natural progression to slide me right in.
So you were already writing procedurals, or?
Great question, because I've never written a mystery. I've never written a first-person mystery. I'm a thriller writer. So this was something, it was a kind of thing when you're offered an opportunity. The answer is yes. What was the question?
Yes.
So I had never read a book in the series. I barely remembered the television series, although I knew I loved it. Enough so, it's kind of like what they say about actors. If they tell you you're going to get the role if you can ride a horse, yes, you say yes, and then you learn to ride the horse.
But didn't Joey Tribbiani say yes to the question, are you circumcised?
Yeah.
Do you remember that storyline? And he got a shower scene and said, Joey, you can't lie about that.
Oh my God.
When you're an actor, you say yes to everything.
Yes, and then you know what? Go get circumcised. That's what it takes to get the role.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever it takes. This is a business based on opportunity. And there aren't a lot of opportunities to take over name brands like Murder, She Wrote.
That's amazing.
And that's the amazing thing about Murder, She Wrote. Everyone in the world knows it. I haven't spoken to one person who said, what's Murder, She Wrote? Now, they don't all know the books, but they all know the TV series. And the TV series is still very popular.
I think it runs every day in the UK.
Except right now, for some reason, they're running Christmas in July right now.
Okay.
So no Murder, She Wrote, but about 1 million people a week watch the reruns. Just midnight to 4, 11 to 5, depending on the day. It's amazing. So,
and do you feel nervous because you're filling well-known boots?
That's a very good question. And I'm nervous when I read the 1-star Amazon reviews that have accused me of changing Jessica. But I decided to bring her into the current time. I decided to make her more Angela Lansbury. Donald Bain, who did such a great job with the books, had never watched the television series. So he didn't understand that Jessica is feisty, Jessica is in your face, and Jessica is relentless. She isn't a Victorian prude. She's a tough woman, a tough widow, who will stop at nothing to help people who are close to her and to see justice done. And that's my Jessica. my Jessica is almost more of a thriller hero, because now her life is threatened in every book. There are big plots, mechanizations happening behind the scenes, but ultimately it's Jessica who figures out what's going on.
And are they going to use any of your book storylines in the TV series? Or?
Well, you know,
is there going to be a reboot?
Angela Lansbury wants to play Jessica one last time.
Okay. How old is she? She must be...
She's 91, but she looks great. She's in great shape. And interestingly enough, a little spoiler alert. Here we're going to break some news.
Okay.
I had a meeting this week while I was in New York because the 50th book of the series is coming out. And I had given them the next scenarios, and we're talking about making the 50th book in the series a book called Murder in Time, in which for the first time, in either the book or the TV series, we go back and meet young Jessica Fletcher as a high school teacher, just breaking out, selling her first book, and solving her first real-life murder. And then in the present, the current Jessica Fletcher will be investigating a murder connected to the original one.
Wow.
So Murder in Time. And why do I say this?
You're writing this?
I'm writing this. This will likely be the 50th book in the series. What a perfect role for Angela Lansbury, because she only has to be on screen half the time. Yeah. And then we see the younger Jessica.
Who could take over for the future?
Well, now you're reading my mind, because the value of the book series would be exponentially raised if the TV series became original again. And then I would be able to write the traditional mysteries featuring the older Jessica, but I could also then segue into the younger mysteries featuring the younger. You know, I could do both. But it's a great opportunity. So it would be my dream if Angela Lansbury wanted to play one of. She gets word that there's a new writer and goes, I want to do this one. Would that be a dream come true? Because here's something I only learned this week. James. You watch those reruns, and their guest stars were amazing. They were the biggest stars of the era, the biggest TV stars. I watched one a couple weeks ago, Chuck Connors, The Rifleman. The Rifleman was on it, and every week there were big TV stars. You all wanted to work with Angela Lansbury. Imagine the lines around the corner to get in line to work with Angela. And even more important, the average Hallmark made-for-TV movie draws 2 million. The originals draws 2 million people. So even if CBS didn't want to do it, it would be the biggest thing Hallmark Movie Channel ever did. You could have 8, 10, 12 million people in the first showing, and then not to mention all the reruns. It would be a huge hit, and we could do it relatively inexpensively because there's no action, there's no set pieces. It's a lot of interiors, just like the TV
And it's
show.
sort of written with Angela being 91 in mind, that you're not going to have her on the back of a car going...
I would definitely write this one. Well, I'll write the book as the book.
Yeah.
But the book would be very adaptable to a 91-year-old Angela Lansbury. Because if Angela Lansbury wants to do it, we're going to figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. How cool would that be? It would be amazing. Now, let's talk about indie versus trad, because that was the panel that you very enthusiastically chaired this morning. It was great. And are you enthusiastic about indie? Or?
Not personally.
Okay.
I think it's wonderful because opportunities are there. And for authors who are really good at social media and self-promotion, I'm a great self-promoter. But I am a writer. I can't, the magic bullet of how to get followers, how to increase your followers exponentially, newsletters, email lists, it's just not something that's in my wheelhouse to excel at. I would be mediocre at it, James, and I don't want to be mediocre.
But I suppose what I mean is, are you enthusiastic about the movement itself and the difference it's making to publishing?
I'm enthusiastic that as I was saying, there are more opportunities for writers to realize their dreams. And here's something I've never said before. So the more writers there are, the more readers there are. Because we are a culture that consumes media. We consume television, we consume video, we consume everything. The more books there are, the more people will read books. The more ways books are delivered, the more people. So the indie market movement helps me by helping other writers. But I am excited now, because 10 years ago, when we started this conference 13 years ago, if you weren't published traditionally, you were self-published and that was it. There was nobody had the phrase indie author had not been coined yet. And you'd see all these people and you'd look out at them at a writer's conference with all their notebooks and you knew they had basically no chance. That the odds against them succeeding were so astronomical as to be not even worth considering. Now everyone who comes to this conference can become a published author, and they're not coming to the conference necessarily to find out if they can do it. They're coming to the conference to find out how they can do it.
Yeah.
What is the best model for them? And that's what that panel this morning explored. What is the best model to pursue?
And you had a couple of indie authors who make 7 figures a year.
And our New York Times, USA Today, New York Times, best-selling authors. So they're hugely successful. Now some of them, remember, a lot of them are hybrids.
Yeah.
Like Lexi Blake was already a best-selling author, and then she, Sylvia Day, same thing. They built their brands and then they expanded their brands. But the woman who wrote 50 Shades of Grey, that was, there was no background to that.
No.
She just wrote it.
And The Martian, I think, is another good example.
The Martian, Andy Weir.
So your job is to keep Thrillerfest relevant as things change, and you seem to have done that because as you say, you're gearing yourselves up to a place where people can learn how, That is a great point, and I think it comes with challenges because every year we have more authors who are members, and every year we have to figure out how to get them all on panels. And that's why you see 6 people on a panel, and you need moderators who can wrangle and know how to keep things moving. But it's a great point, because I can't tell you how many discussions we had over the early years about, do we recognize indie? Imagine, this is 8 or 9 years ago, we probably spent a whole board meeting arguing over should indie authors be included in ITW. And I had proposed something that was radical at the time, a separate membership for indie authors. Now, the line is becoming, it isn't one or the other. There are these models, and just what you said, the fact that so many indie authors are actually more successful, more in control of their careers than traditionally published authors. Remember, a traditionally published author sells 10,000 copies. That's a lot of books. They're getting a royalty that's relatively small. They won't earn back even their advance on 10,000. But an indie author who makes 10,000, if they're on Amazon, even if they're selling at $4.99, so they're getting 70%, or say they get 2/3, well, let's say they get $3, which is conservative, a book. If they can just sell a modest amount of 10,000, they're at 30,000 books, $30,000, with probably no commissions to agents or anything like that. That's a lot of money for an author. That's 9 to 5 quitting money, isn't it? Which is the dream, I think, for some people who just want to be able to write for a living.
Yes.
It is possible. That's opening up. John, look, we're pressed for time on this because we're trying to keep these to 10 minutes.
I love it.
I get the feeling we could probably talk for 2 hours.
We could do a double. We could do part 1 and part 2.
We need a full podcast interview at some point. But John, thank you so much.
This was great.
It's been a real treat being at Thrillerfest. You do a great show, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
We look forward to seeing you back at Thrillerfest next year.
We're going to be here.
All right. And we'll be same place, same time.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, John. There we go, Jon Land. I did describe him as one of life's great enthusiasts, and that he is, right?
Yeah, he's a force of nature. Very, very ebullient, extremely friendly. Just a lovely guy. I mean, I found him really easy to get on with. He was a great host, great presenter for the panel that I did, one of the panels that I did. Just a really nice guy.
Yeah, great. Well, I hope the wind's not too distracting for you, or the aircraft, but we are in a live environment. We're out of our respective homes where we are for most of the year, and it's nice for us to be able to stand here and talk to you from New York. I hope you're appreciating the fact that we like being in the outdoors occasionally. Well, we have one final interview in this episode, and it is an absolute corker. This is Lynda La Plante. Now, Lynda was forging ahead as a screenwriter and a playwright for TV at a time where it was difficult for women to be seen as anything else than basically dolly birds in 1970s sitcoms and dramas, and she spells all that out in this interview in brilliant fashion. She started as an actress because that was what was available to her, and she's ended up as one of, frankly, writing royalty in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, she certainly is, and I saw her on a couple of panels. She's hilarious, and I you know, as we record this, I haven't actually seen the interview yet, so I'm looking forward to listen to that one when we're ready to go live.
Well, let's hear from Lynda La Plante. Lynda, thank you for sitting by while we set up 5,000 bits of equipment, which is the modern way of doing things. Real pleasure to speak to you. So you're here at Thrillerfest, and I think you're about to do a panel or a talk. What are you going to talk about? Do you have a particular message for aspiring authors?
The message really is, if you want to write, you write. So many people say, oh, I've got a great story, but I can't write it. And it's something that occurs an awful lot. You'd be surprised how many people have a great story, but don't feel that they can write it. But, you know, writing, you have to have a lot of time, a lot of patience, a lot of concentration. And, you know, my advice is always, if you can tell the story, you can write it. It's like a joke. You know, jokes have beginning, middle, and end. Some people are brilliant at telling a joke. Others will flatline it. And it's the same with writers writing novels. You're halfway through the book and you think, oh dear, dropped it now, it's no good. And so I would just make everybody really encourage that if you want to write, write. But write about something that you know. That doesn't mean that you narrow the world you're writing in. To the contrary, you want to find out something, go to source. Mm-hmm. Actually talk to people, and then back it comes. And when you're talking to someone about, say, forensic, they will give you more material than you could dream of. And I've found in my life and in my writing world, I always go to source.
You find people enjoy talking to you about their... Yes. I mean, I guess somebody whose head's down in forensic pathology most days of the week, and suddenly there's a novelist talking to them, you find there's a cooperative relationship?
But you don't go as a novelist, you go as an interested person, so you have to do a little bit of background work. You just don't go and go, what's forensic science about, you know? What's a fingerprint? It's advanced to such an extent. I don't write anything without, if it has forensic, police procedure, medical procedure, pathology, I'll give it to those that know the business. And if they say this is wrong, so when I'm watching a TV show or a film and, for example, they're talking about toxicology report, and they will say, oh, we're just getting the toxicology report. And I think, well, that is impossible because I know that would take 3 to 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so to actually have, you know, an expert in toxicology say the length of time is because we've got a backlog of cases, which means as a writer you have to fill that gap and fill it with material that is of interest rather than go 3 weeks later the toxicology report came in. What are they doing when they're waiting? And that's the way I work. So I very rarely write anything that is not authenticated. Yeah. Prime Suspect is a very, very interesting example of a writer bringing something to a company. And I pitched, you know, it's a female high-ranking detective because that's what they were looking for. A murder. Very rare, because we're going back to 1993, there were not many female detectives, and I was fortunate to work alongside a brilliant one who guided me and used to be very, very critical and wanted me to get it right. And she was, when I say very critical, she would sometimes look at pages and say, rubbish, rubbish, absolute rubbish. Just go direct. Why don't you ask a direct question? And anyway, the first draft is finished, and it goes in to the company. They hate it. Everybody hated it. And they said, oh, she doesn't, you know, feel any emotion. I mean, we see her handling a dead girl, and she's not crying. And I go, she's a policewoman. Why would she cry? That's her job. And it showed the discrimination that was happening then. I only got that from the source because she told me, this high-ranking detective said it was a nightmare. The discrimination, at times she would work in a station where there was no ladies' toilet. And when the police officers play acting, thinking it very witty, would put, you know, black fingerprint ink all around the toilet seat. So you got up and you had a black rim round your bum. And but it was and you take it in and you write it out. And that's how I work.
So that was really interesting that one of your motivations, and this is mid-90s, early 90s, for the first prime suspect was to raise the profile, give some credibility to females working in that. I mean, that's 20 years ahead of.
Well, the reality is also Widows was even earlier, 1983. And there were 4 leading roles for 4 unknown women. You would not be allowed to do that now. If I went to a television network and said, I've got an idea for a series to star 4 women, and their husband die, and then they pull a bank raid that their husbands were going to do, they go, yes, well, who's going to star in it? What have they done? So even as onto Prime Suspect, when they said, who do you see as the detective? I said, Helen Mirren. Oh, yes, but hasn't done any TV, has she? And you go, she is a superb actress. What are you talking about? Yeah. And so because my world had been the theatre and been a TV actress, I knew who could do it and who couldn't. But the sad thing is now, today, is the repetition. You see the same face in every other show. Until you're so bored with them, you don't really need to switch off.
They have a fairly narrow field of view, you think, now in television.
And, you know, credits. What have they done? Oh, they've come out of a soap. They were in a soap for 8 years, and now they're free to go, well, I don't want them. You know, it's very different now.
Where did you learn your craft? When did you develop the writing that you talked about at the beginning, the storytelling?
I think I've always been a storyteller since I was a child, but had no concept of ever being a writer. And as a working actress, and I would say I was not necessarily a frightfully well-known actress. I was in many ways a successful actress because I earned a very big income and was always in work. And when you work for the Royal Shakespeare Company or the National Theatre and you do fringe plays and you do repertory, you become very, very confident in your knowledge of plays and playwriting. But as a writer, I'd never even considered it. It was just until I was in such an appallingly bad TV show and happened to say, can anybody, you know, have a go at this? And I was told, yeah, send in your ideas. Now the luck, you know, a lot of it does depend on luck. And I was lucky because the first 3 ideas that I submitted for this TV show were turned down. I'd also actually written leading roles for myself. I thought, well, I'll star in this.
That's a very Hollywood way of doing it.
Yeah, I'll star in them all. And so they were all turned down. But one was called The Widows. And somebody had scrawled in pencil, this is brilliant. It could have been a cleaner, who knows. So I took another look at it and kind of cut it down a bit. It was a page and a half, which is, again, when I'm working with students, I say, learn how to do a treatment.
So that was, I was going to say, that was the treatment you submitted.
A page and a half.
Very succinct.
No more.
Yeah.
Because if you think that every network's getting thousands in, you know, and it breaks my heart when I know writers were sent in a full manuscript and, you know, never hear a word.
Never going to be read.
And then maybe 5 years later, they can look at something and go, I think that was mine. You know, great thieves are in this industry. Anyway, I rewrote it. Now, luck. I sent it to a company called Euston Films, who was run by a genius woman called Verity Lambert, who did a lot of television drama. And I'd actually worked for her as an actress. And she called me up and said, I'd like to see you. Funny thing was, I thought, well, I won't put my acting name. I'll put my married name. So I put Lynda La Plante, Widows, by Lynda La Plante. And when I walked in, her secretary said, oh God, it's not you, is it? And I said, yes, it is. And they said, oh, we all thought you were a transvestite trucker. And I said, no, it's me. So when I got in to see Verity, she couldn't believe it. And she said, right, have you written anything? I said, well, not really. She said, look, the problem is, 6 hour, big lot of writing, 6 episodes. I tell you what I'll do, let's see you write the first hour, and if it's any good, we'll commission. If it isn't, would you allow it to go to another writer? So, truthfully, I wasn't even sure what the word commission meant. And I said, oh, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I don't mind. And it wasn't until I got home that I realised it was a commission for episode 1 of Widows. And I had no idea what to do. And you think, how come I've been an actress for all those years with all these scripts, interior, exterior, exit here, and I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know what to do. And I thought, well, maybe what I should do is go to source, find the women, find who they are, where are they. And that's when I began. And it took quite a while for me to visit prisons, women in prison.
You actually went looking for widows or wives or widows of criminals?
Of hard criminals.
Yeah.
I met criminals, I met the police, and at every level was given so much help. Because as you rightly said earlier, do people talk? Yeah, they love to. And it's a very strange thing that as an actress, I'd played hookers, I'd played prostitutes, in fact quite a lot, because, I come from Liverpool, short, red hair, oh, she's got to be a hooker. And so in every show possible you can think of, I'd played a prostitute. Hello, love, you coming my way, So I'd done a lot of that. And suddenly, I wanted to talk to them. And you can't just very easily go up to street girl and say, excuse me, I'm writing a script. But I did. And I was told to F off mostly, until I said, I'll pay you for your time. Yeah. The money was the incentive.
Well, it's probably easier money than the other money they was taking.
They were funny too.
I bet.
Because they said, how much are you paying her? She doesn't earn that in an hour, love. She's been lying, pulling your leg. So it was... But what I got was a difference. You want to know why I'm a hooker? Here you go. Look at the line. That's why I'm an addict. Or a weekend prostitute. Come down from Sheffield to London. I've got my patch. I need the money for my kids. And there was still the shell of how I'd acted, but there was a depth and a darkness. And I thought, this is where I've got to go. It took me weeks and weeks of finding the lead woman, the criminal's maid wife, the mama, the big mama.
You had to find the physical person in the end to inspire the story.
And she was, for example, she worked in a market, and one of the other market people said, her husband's in for murder. And they would love to take murder. Oh, she's tough, very tough. So, I'd go up to her and say, would you talk to me? I'm writing a TV show. And she was even more forthright in telling me to F off than the prostitutes. And it took weeks. And out of the blue one day, she came, she said, "You want to come for tea?" Nothing ever prepared me for her beautifully furnished council flat. Antiques, thick carpet, but what really was amazing was she was immaculate in a beautiful suit. And when I walked in, playing was Kathleen Ferrier's Life Without Death. And I went, "Oh." And she said, "What, love? What, love? Huh? What's the matter? Don't add up the boxes. Is that right, love? Huh? Don't know me, do you?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Well, it's all game, isn't it?" And then I could see she was forming in my head all the time. So all this work went on, and, you know, then I was working away, and I submitted it. And then my tutor and my mentor was Verity Lambert. I miss her every day of my life when I'm writing.
Yeah, Verity Lambert, I mean, she was a huge figure in British television.
You have people give you notes now that make a blaze of rage appear. Verity Lambert's notes were so simple. "Who's your lead in this? Who is she?" I said, "Well, Dolly Rawlins. How come she's not on till page 25? That is a superb note.
And then you're thinking, why isn't she
Why
on?
isn't she? Let me have a look. Let me rework. And so that's what it was all about.
Less is more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was a genius.
Okay, Lynda, thank you so much indeed for taking.
pleasure.
Do you know, it's been absolutely thrilling listening to you talk. We could sit here for another hour.
Thanks
So
very
really
much.
enjoyed it. Thank you so much. John Dyer and I could easily have spoken to Lynda La Plante for a couple of days. I'm not exaggerating.
There's a very nice picture of you that we put into the Facebook group with John basically cuddling her.
He wasn't going to let her go.
No, there was a double arm wrap.
Yeah.
And that's a significant. When John's got both arms around you, you know you've been cuddled.
You're not going anywhere.
No, that was nice, and she was very friendly, really funny. I mean, the interplay between her and Karen Slaughter on the panel I saw was hilarious. They were both very, very funny. I think that was where the red electric thing was described.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, absolutely hilarious, and I thoroughly enjoyed listening to them.
Yeah, and it was only really Lynda La Plante's publicist behind us winding things up, because I think Lynda would be happy to have talked on, and we really enjoyed chatting
Just downstairs,
to her.
actually.
Just
Just downstairs. She's waiting for to keep going.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about Lynda's method? Because she talked about meeting prostitutes, about meeting the wives of hard criminals, to properly get inside their head to write about them. You kept talking about go back to source for authenticity.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. I mean, I don't go to quite that extent. It'd be quite hard for me to speak to assassins because obviously, they wouldn't want to be interviewed by an author.
Well, if there are any assassins, professional assassins,
James Blatch. Anyway, no, I don't do that. I do most of mine on the internet, but people like Lynda,
Google investigators. Is that what it's called?
Could be. That's an interesting new word for me. But people like Lynda, Martina Cole is another example in the UK. They do really get to grips with their subject matters and do a lot of research. There's plenty of other authors who've really gone into detail. And the key, I mean, the end result, the objective that you're always trying to go for, and I'm just the same, is authenticity. So authors who get authenticity right will find that readers can get really immersed in their books. And one of the emails and the comments I get from readers and in reviews that I love most of all is when people say that I must have been to Juarez in Mexico or
Pyongyang.
Yeah, anywhere like that. I mean, these are not places that I have been to, but because the internet is so amazing and Google's often been there before me, I can give people a fairly good impression that I must have been there too. So, it's horses for courses. That's how I do it. But I think the way that Lynda does it is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we do live in an age of unparalleled access to other people's lives through platforms such as YouTube. But of course, Lynda didn't have that in her day when she was walking the streets looking for people living in the very sort of shadows of society. But even YouTube will throw up revealing interviews with people from those different walks of life, which does make it a little bit easier, well, a lot easier for us today. Good. Well, you look like our man in Havana or something. I think you strike the part very well. Graham Greene type character. Perhaps not quite as casually dressed. But
No, he'd probably have chinos, I should imagine.
yeah,
Something like that.
safari suit,
Yes, yes.
like Roger Moore, raising one eyebrow.
If only. I can dream. Maybe next year.
Okay, look, that's it for this second of 3 parts from New York. We were going to call them New York Stories. We're going to call it either Thrillerfest or New York Stories. In typical our fashion, we haven't decided before we've gone to air and recorded it, so you'll see on the banner, probably from Thrillerfest. So that is part 2. In next week's episode, we have Lee Child, one of the bywords for thriller writing today. We were absolutely delighted to get him on. He's like Mark Dawson, but in the traditional sense. Lexi Blake, who is a romance writer, romance suspense, is why she was at Thrillerfest, and she's a great person to talk to. She's prolific. I think 61 books we counted out. She's got out. We're also going to talk to Alan Jacobson, who is somebody who you can listen to what Alan talks about and learn about how to promote yourself, which doesn't necessarily come naturally to everyone, particularly British people, but he was fairly shameless, and it's a useful interview. So that's next week. Join us for that, and in the meantime, have a great week writing and a great week selling your books.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.